Hi, I'm Athina, and this is Athina Offline. This podcast is basically just an extension of my journal. In each episode, we're going to start off with things that I've written down in the past, and together we're going to unpack it. So, before starting off and reading some quotes from a past journal entry of mine, I did want to sort of explain the title, the name of this podcast, since this is the very first episode. Athina Offline is a passion project that I'm taking on because I'm an avid podcast listener. I listen to podcasts all the time when I'm washing dishes, when I'm brushing my teeth, washing my face, whenever I have to do any household chore, when I'm out walking. And the name, ironically enough, is Athina Offline, even though it is going on an online platform, because it's an activity that I can do instead of doom scrolling on TikTok. So, anyways, let's get right into it. These are some quotes from a journal entry I wrote on February 8th of 2023. So, it's been a while. First quote I have is, "That's what adulthood feels like to me. You just keep moving and going along with the life you currently have, even if it's not the one you envisioned for yourself." And another quote I have is, "What would 16-year-old me think of my life now? I don't think she'd recognize me or herself." So, sort of depressing. But honestly, this is, I think, something common or staple in the human experience, is feeling some disappointment because you didn't live up to your younger self's expectations. You didn't accomplish her dreams or her goals. When I wrote that journal entry, I remember I had just watched the movie Past Lives. Highly recommend if you haven't watched it already. And I think they had asked Nora, the main character, if she was living the life 12-year-old her had dreamed of. And she said she didn't know, but it was the life she was currently living. And that resonated with me a lot because I felt like I was living a life that was completely different than what I would have imagined when I was 16, 15 years old. I remember being a teenager and dreaming about what adult Athina would be like and the things she would accomplish and how life would look like at the mature age of 25, which is how old I am now. And some things I would have expected to have happened by now is, first of all, I would have expected to be graduated from uni by now. Um, I also imagined myself being in a committed relationship on the way to being engaged by now, which isn't the case. And going back to not being graduated from uni, I took a different life path than a lot of my high school classmates did. Instead of studying something in uni straight out of high school, I took a gap year. I knew a lot of people who, those people who know their passions and have known their passions since they were young, those kinds of people who are like, I have known that I wanted to be a doctor since I was 5 years old. I was never that kind of person. I was the kind of kid who one week said they wanted to be a doctor, and then they wanted to be the president, and then they wanted to be a singer. I never had a clearly defined passion in life, and that weighed on me, and that made me very unsure of what I wanted to study when I had graduated. I felt a little bit lost, and instead of picking whatever degree, I said, okay, let me take a gap year, let me think about what I want to study. I'm gonna work throughout this year. I didn't take the gap year to travel as I would have wished, but also when I took the gap year, the pandemic had hit, so even if I wanted to travel, I wouldn't have been able to. But I ended up working while my friends had already started uni. And by the end of that year, I realized that I still wasn't sold on any career, but I had to pick something. So, what did I end up picking? Communications. I think the one degree that sparked my interest the most was marketing, but I had decided to start studying at a public uni, and marketing wasn't a degree they offered. And so I said, okay, communications, next best thing. And I started with communications, but I started studying something that I wasn't 100% sold on. And I think we're never 100% sold on anything. You just have to take the risk and try it out and see if it works for you or if it doesn't. But, anyways, I started studying communications and I stuck with that degree. I studied for about 3 years. Yeah, 3 years or so. And while I was studying, I was working at the same time, so I was going at a really slow pace. I remember I reached one point where all my high school classmates had graduated by then, and I was still studying communications. And I wasn't even like fully advanced in the degree where I could say, okay, I'm going to graduate in the next year. Like, no, I had a long ways to go. And that was because my life path was different. So even if I didn't meet that 16-year-old expectation I had for myself, I took a different life path um, than I would have imagined I would have took, and that's okay. I remember when I reached that point where most of my classmates had graduated, and I would go on LinkedIn and see that someone new had posted that they graduated, and I felt so behind in life. But even though I didn't meet that goal I had for myself, which I think is a very common dream or expectation that we set for ourselves when we're younger, is to graduate, to study something. Even though I didn't reach that goal, I took a different life path that taught me things I would have never learned if I had just committed to studying and not worked alongside my studies. So I maintained a full-time job throughout those 3 years that I was studying communications. And I gained a lot of professional experience that those same classmates that were already graduated didn't have. I had like 3 years under my belt of professional experience, marketing experience. I learned everything on the job. I remember entering jobs and feeling lost. I had never studied what I was seeing on the job. They were always marketing jobs. What I was working in, I was working in the marketing field. And then I remember learning everything and eventually training other people who may have graduated and had a degree, and were just entering the company. And so even though I didn't reach that expectation that I had for myself, I learned so many skills and practical knowledge that I would have never had if I had reached that goal of, say, being graduated from uni by the age of 22 or whatever. Um, and I studied communications for 3 years. I reached a point where I realized I hated it. I did not like it. Every uni assignment felt like such a hassle, felt like it took every fiber, every ounce of energy I had to just sit down and do the uni assignment. And that's when I realized I didn't want to continue with that degree. And I had a moment where I thought about that. I thought about how old I was and how I was letting myself down in a way, because I didn't want to continue with a degree. I wanted to switch degrees and I'd be starting fresh. I kept thinking how that life goal I had of having been graduated from uni kept feeling further and further away, and that paralyzed me in that moment. I thought a lot about what other people would think of me, those people who had graduated by now, what they'd think of me if I graduated by 28, 29. I felt so old. I felt like I was behind in life. And that stopped me from switching for a long time. I think in the first year of studying communications, I realized it wasn't for me, but I said I'm just going to stick with it. I want to be graduated as early as possible, so I'm just going to stick with it even if I know I don't like it. And that was the wrong thing to do because, first of all, no one cares about your life as much as you think they do. Everyone's in their own little bubble. And, like, what you study and what you study, what you major in is such a big decision. Like, we're faced with this decision when we're 18 years old, and we're so young. It's hard to decide what you want to do for the rest of your life. You have to try things out and see if they work, if they don't work for you. So yeah, I think I would have been even more disappointed. I think 16-year-old me would have been even more disappointed if I had continued with communications, have graduated by now, and I would have been extremely unhappy with my life, my job. I wouldn't be doing what I love to do. So I think that was a lesson for me was, yeah, I didn't meet 16-year-old me's goal of being graduated by now, but I took a different path, and that's okay. I learned different things. Again, when I was working alongside my communications degree, I gained a lot of professional experience. I remember friends would come to me for help with LinkedIn, with their resumes, and it's okay if you take a different path in life that wasn't what younger you had anticipated. When you're younger, you don't have all the context. You imagine life is going to be easy. You imagine you're not going to have any setbacks. You think it's just going to be smooth sailing. And the best way to grow in life is from disappointment and pivoting and testing things out, seeing if they work for you, if they don't work for you, trying new things out. So yeah, last year I ended up switching degrees, even though I felt really old, and I started studying marketing, and I am very happy I switched. My grades have been really good so far, so I feel like that's extra confirmation that the switch was for me. And yeah, that's basically what I wanted to talk about. I think going back to what I had said earlier, I would have thought that I would be in a committed relationship by now and on the way to getting engaged. And that's not the case. And again, I'm 25, so whenever I open up Instagram, I swear it's engagement after engagement, like an engagement announcement, a pregnancy announcement. Like, I still feel like I'm that 16-year-old self, but clearly I'm not, because all my high school classmates are getting engaged, they're having children, and that hasn't affected me as maybe it would affect me, I don't know, a couple years back when I was constantly thinking about, like, damn, like, I am letting myself down. I'm letting younger me down. But now when I open up Instagram and I see all those engagement announcements, pregnancy announcements, whatever, it doesn't affect me because I realized everyone is on their own life path. You can't compare your life path to someone else's life. It's not a race. That's the thing. It's not a race, and your life is not over if you're in your late 20s, in your 30s. Like, there's this misconception that you have to reach all these goals as fast as you possibly can, and that when your 20s are over, your life is over. Like, the clock is running against you, and that's not the case. So basically, what I want to talk about in this episode is, I think all of us can relate to the fact that there are things that younger us wanted and we weren't able to achieve for them. But that's okay, because we achieved other things and we learned different things. And I'm a big believer on everything happens the way it needs to happen. And if we didn't take that different route, then we wouldn't have learned everything we did learn, and we wouldn't have met the people that we met. And yeah, basically just have some grace for yourself, because younger you didn't have the context. They didn't know the setbacks you'd have. And your life is not over if you didn't reach those milestones. You have your whole life to reach those milestones. I know people who start studying in uni when they're 60 years old. Life is not over if you didn't meet these expectations in the timeline you thought you would have. So yeah, basically, shake off the timeline. There's no timeline in life. Everyone's living life in their own way, and no one's thinking about you that much. And to finish off this episode, I have a couple of journal prompts that I want to share with whoever's listening, if there's anyone listening, just to sort of reflect on this subject and help them through it. So, first journal prompt. If your 16-year-old self met you today, what do you think would surprise them the most? And then another journal prompt I have for you guys is, what's something your younger self desperately wanted that your current self doesn't even think about anymore? Write about it. I'll meet you back here next week for another entry. Bye.